Conditions May Apply by CinnamonPinecones. Read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 47. Good afternoon, sharks. Have you ever wanted a gun, but worse? With our groundbreaking tech, Sukashi got back to me about the net gun guys. They both got them from the gang, but they don't know anything about the supplier. They didn't give up any names or locations, so it's a dead end for now, Eraser said in lieu of a greeting when Ivy crested the roof. Great. That's just great, they replied as they plopped down on the ledge beside him to eat like they did every night. I had a colleague make these for us, he added as he passed something to them without looking at their unmasked face. It was a knife, in its own sheath connected to a bracer. They waited for him to explain rather than asking because they didn't have their voice modulator on and they were currently stuffing their face. It goes on your wrist, and if you bend your hand back, the latch will disengage and push the knife up into your hand. If anyone asks, I didn't give this to you, but this should help with the nut gun epidemic going on around here. I've got one too, he elaborated. That was really nice. That was so thoughtful. They knew it obviously helped him as well, but he got one for them too. They fumbled their mask back into place to respond. That's a good idea. Thanks, they sputtered out. Eraser just hummed in response as he shoveled his own dinner into his mouth. It was another week before they saw anything else come of the illegal support gear going around the city. One of the ladies had told them that they had heard from someone else that some guy was messing around with a, quote, freeze ray, which they weren't too excited to hear about. It had passed through several degrees of separation, so they had no way of knowing how exaggerated the story had become, but apparently it encased anything it was pointed at up to 50 feet away in a thick layer of ice, which was just great. They remained hypervigilant and kept an ear out at all times for any bit of information they could, but the gang was learning from their mistakes. Everything was kept under wraps aside from that one incident, and it had them thoroughly on edge. Eraserhead seemed more intense than normal too. Everything had been too calm, too normal. The two of them were going about a standard patrol when they came across some sort of altercation. Some man was shouting at a woman in a different language that neither of them could place. It hadn't gotten violent. It appeared to be a domestic dispute. But the moment he grabbed her arm and pushed her to the ground, they stepped in. Eraser swung down and kicked the man in the opposite direction of the woman as Ivy checked in with her. They were leading the victim away as Eraser went after the perp on the ground. He wasn't nearly as dazed from the blow as either of them had expected, and Eraser was still a good 6 paces away when they saw him pull out some sort of gun. No one reacted fast enough to stop him from taking aim and firing right at Eraser. They couldn't see anything from behind him, but judging off Eraser's pained grunt and staggered footing, they could only imagine that he hit his mark. Ivy's stomach dropped, and they wasted no time shoving the victim behind a dumpster and charging. The man was fiddling with the gun as they ran at him, but they were too fast. Before the man could finish whatever he was trying to do with the weapon, Ivy delivered a swift kick to the side of his head. He let out a pained noise, but seemed no worse for wear after just a split second. He should be out cold from that. It must be a quirk, some sort of resiliency or shock absorption, perhaps. Whatever it was, it clearly didn't stop him from feeling pain. He went to go back to fiddling with the gun, but Ivy didn't give him the chance. With the quirk theory in mind, they kicked his hands with all the force they could muster. The gun went clattering out of reach, and the man yelped, but he just started scrambling after it on all fours. Definitely a quirk. That would have shattered some phalanges if it wasn't. Eraser was still standing and was well enough to kick the weapon behind himself and further away from the perp, but he was gripping his left shoulder, and blood stood out in stark contrast to his pale hand. It looked like there was a knife sticking out from between his fingers. A knife gun? Really? What the hell was even the point of that? It was just a worse gun, especially if it had to be reloaded after each firing. Ivy signaled to Eraserhead to activate his quirk on the man as they took out their flashlight and brought it down at the junction of the man's neck and shoulder. He dropped from his hands and knees and fell face first into the dirty asphalt, which Ivy took sick pleasure in. Unfortunately, he could suffocate if they left him like that, so they kicked him not too gently over to his front. They gave him a few kicks to see if he was really out cold. Ivy, that's enough, they heard Eraser bark over their shoulder as he dragged them away with his good arm. They looked around for the woman, but it seemed that she took the moment of distraction to leg it out of there. Whatever. She didn't seem violent nor injured, so if she didn't want to stick around for the cops, then that wasn't their problem. Oh, come on. You're gonna call the paramedics for yourself anyway. Why not make their trip worth it? They quipped back, glaring at him. His face fell and he let an uncharacteristically dramatic groan. What the hell was that for? They questioned. He looked so tired, more so than usual, which was an impressive feat. Nothing, just paperwork for this. He gestured to his shoulder. Not looking forward to it. Why do you need to fill out paperwork for that? The government punishing you for not dodging good enough? They taunted. He rolled his eyes at them. No, it's to keep a record in case the injury puts me out of work, either now or in the future from complications, so I can get compensation. However, I'm going to be fine by tomorrow because of that friend I mentioned before with the healing quirk. So I have to fill out a mountain of paperwork to get stitches that will be out by tomorrow afternoon, he explained. That did sound like a pain, but it was such a privileged problem that they couldn't not make fun of him. Oh, poor Eraser, you have access to health care that's too good, and the government doesn't give you a special loophole? They said as obnoxiously as possible. I have a knife in my shoulder, and you're making fun of me? He shot back with no intonation. Yes, I am, they confirmed with a smile. A-hole, he accused with no real bite. Damn, okay. I was gonna offer to stitch that up myself to save you the paperwork, but I guess I won't now, 'cause I'm such an a-hole, they said as they theatrically pretended to inspect their nails through their gloves. When they looked back up at Eraserhead, he was wearing the most expressive scowl they'd ever seen him pull, and they couldn't help but laugh. They really didn't think he'd take them up on that offer, but he was looking at them now like he very much wanted to, and he was having a hard time giving up the dignity to ask. Dang, how bad was that paperwork? Tommy, man, is the paperwork bad enough that you'd rather get back alley stitches with no painkillers from an unqualified amateur? They asked incredulously. His scowl only deepened. But that was enough of a response for them to get the memo. Damn, okay, I'll text Suka to take care of this jerk, they announced as they pulled out their phone and sent off the message. All right, I'll go set up my office around the corner then. Good luck hiding or explaining. They gestured to the sluggishly bleeding wound in his shoulder with a knife still sticking out of it. That, to whoever shows up, they said as they skipped away. They went around the corner to an adjacent alleyway and took a moment to calm their nerves. He was okay. It was just a knife to the shoulder. It would have to be a very lucky shot for it to have hit anything. The brachial artery was protected more toward the underside of the arm, so he was going to be fine. Eraser certainly wouldn't be so nonchalant about it if he thought there was a chance it nicked any major veins or arteries. After collecting themselves, they set up a few crates for him to sit on and then propped up their flashlight on the dumpster. They might have to adjust when he got there, but it looked like it would provide fairly good light at that angle. They fished around their pockets and pulled out the sterile packaged needle and thread and the small bottle of rubbing alcohol they kept with them when on patrol. It had already come in handy once, so they made sure to keep it stocked in one of their pockets at all times. They were pretty sure this was their last needle, though. They should pick up some more. They'd just finished sanitizing their hands when Eraser rounded the corner with his capture scarf sagging suspiciously lower on his left shoulder than it usually did. A master of disguise there, Eraser. I'm sure they didn't suspect a thing. They poked. He rolled his eyes again for the millionth time that night and gingerly sat down on the crates they'd stacked for him. He removed his capture scarf and set it on his knee before unzipping his jumpsuit enough to slip his arm out. But they were going to have to pull the knife out for him to finish that. Communicating with a glance and a nod, Ivy unwrapped a package of gauze, held them in one hand, and pulled the knife out with the other. Eraser winced, but quickly shrugged his shoulder out of its confines, and they applied pressure with the gauze. It took them about 15 minutes to finish everything up and tape a bandage over the top, and Eraser didn't say a word the whole time. He just sat still, with his jaw clenched and his eyes closed. He was probably trying to distract himself from the pain, but it was a little off-putting, so once they were done, they pulled out a pen and signed the bandage with their name with as many hearts and XOs as they could before he opened his eyes to question what was going on. Ivy, is that my damn pen? He asked calmly, but they startled nonetheless. They didn't even notice him turn his head. They were too busy putting the finishing touches on a rudimentary portrait of the two of them in a heart. Ha ha, what? Oh, I've had this pen for months. Could it be yours? They claimed with obvious insincerity in their tone. It was his pen. They just took it out of his pocket like less than a minute ago, when his eyes were closed. He snatched it out of their hand with his good arm, and they let him because they figured they'd poked enough fun at him for the night. He did get stabbed after all, or would this be considered getting shot? They could afford to be a little bit nicer. Just a little bit, though. Right. Let's just call it for the night. It's nearly 3 anyway, he said after he shrugged his jumpsuit back in place. Thanks for that, he added awkwardly. Oh, sure, any time. Well, not any time, but you know my office hours. I'd prefer you avoid getting stabbed in the future, though, they said in an insufferably cheery tone. Did you tell the officers about the gun? As crappy of an idea as it is, I think it's still considered support gear, even if it is just a gun but worse. He snorted at that before responding, Yeah, I turned it in to the responding officer, Sukov. She is taking charge of the support gear case, so I'm sure the info will get back to him. But you can text him if you want, he replied as he settled his capture scarf into place, frowning when he saw the blood stain on it. I'll text him. The sooner we get information, the better, they said as they fished their phone out of their pocket. Go home, kid, Eraser said, sounding as tired as he looked. They supposed getting stabbed would take the wind out of your sails. Yeah, I will. Try not to get jumped on your way home, they dismissed as they waved him away while finishing up their message to the detective. Will do, he said with the laziest mock salute they'd ever seen before he walked away. Poor Eraser couldn't swing back home tonight. He had to walk. Poor thing. They would have made fun of him again if he wasn't already out of earshot. Seeing Eraser get shot at for the second time in as many weeks was not great for their nerves. They did their best to play it off in the moment, but their hands still had his blood on them. It was underneath their fingernails, and they were going to have to scrub it out. They'd seen people get shot. Technically, they'd been shot before. It wasn't a pretty sight. They couldn't help but remember the man they had seen after being shot in the back of the head. The way his face was broken and distorted. The smell of blood was sharp in their nose from the memory. No, they were not going to sleep well tonight. That was practically a guarantee. Hopefully, Suka could get some more information out of this guy at the very least. End of chapter.